I burst through those hospital doors at 2 in the morning, only to have a nurse grab my arm and whisper one word that made my blood run cold. Hide. Through the small window of my husband's ICU room, I saw exactly why, and in that moment, my entire world shattered into 1,000 pieces. My name is Rebecca Matthews, I'm 34 years old, and I'm about to tell you how one night in Seattle changed everything I thought I knew about the man I'd loved for 9 years. Let me take you back to where this nightmare really began. It was a Tuesday evening, around 7 p.m., and I was finishing up at the architecture firm where I work as a senior designer. The Seattle rain was doing its usual thing, pattering against the office windows while I wrapped up the final touches on a waterfront development project. My phone rang, and the screen showed Seattle General Hospital. My heart immediately started hammering in my chest because David, my husband, had left that morning complaining about chest pains. I'd practically pushed him out the door, insisting he get checked out because his father had died of a heart attack at 42 and David had just turned 36. The voice on the other end was professional but urgent. "Your husband has been admitted to the intensive care unit. He's had a significant cardiac event. We need you here as soon as possible." I didn't even grab my coat, I just ran. The drive from downtown Seattle to the hospital normally takes 20 minutes, but I made it in 12, my hands shaking on the wheel the entire time, rain streaming down the windshield like tears I couldn't yet cry. When I arrived at the hospital, the fluorescent lights were harsh and unforgiving. Everything smelled like antiseptic and fear. I rushed to the ICU on the 4th floor, my heels clicking frantically against the linoleum. But as I approached David's room, room 412, a young nurse, probably in her late 20s with kind eyes and dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, stepped directly into my path. She grabbed my arm, not roughly but firmly, and pulled me toward a small supply closet adjacent to his room. If you're enjoying this story and want to hear more real-life dramas like this one, please hit that subscribe button. We're working toward our goal of 1,000 subscribers, and your support means everything. Just click that red subscribe button below this video. "What are you doing?" I demanded, trying to pull away. "I need to see my husband." The nurse's grip tightened slightly, and she looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. A mixture of pity and something else. Something that looked almost like guilt. "Ma'am, you need to wait just a moment. Please, trust me." Before I could argue further, I heard voices coming from David's room. Through the small window in the door, I could see into the dimly lit ICU room, and what I saw made absolutely no sense at all. There was a woman sitting beside David's bed, a woman I'd never seen before in my life. She was probably in her early 30s, with long auburn hair that fell in waves over her shoulders. She was holding David's hand, the one without the IV line, and she was crying. Not just crying. She was sobbing, her whole body shaking with the force of it. And David, my David, even through his obvious pain and the oxygen mask covering most of his face, was looking at her with such tenderness, such intimacy, that I felt physically sick. The woman leaned down and pressed her forehead against his hand. I heard her voice, muffled through the door but still audible. "Please don't leave me. Please don't leave us. We need you. I need you." And then she placed her hand on her stomach, and I saw it. The unmistakable curve of pregnancy. She had to be at least 5 or 6 months along. I turned to the nurse, my voice barely a whisper. "Who is that?" The nurse looked down at her feet, clearly uncomfortable. "That's Emily Harrison. She's listed as his emergency contact. She said she's his partner." His partner. The word hung in the air like poison. I felt the walls of that small supply closet closing in on me. My husband of 9 years, the man who kissed me goodbye every morning, who told me he loved me every single night, had a whole other life. Another woman. A baby on the way. Your subscription helps us share more stories like Rebecca's. If you haven't already, please click subscribe and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. It takes just 1 second and means so much to this channel. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, watching this woman cry over my husband. It could have been seconds or hours. Time had stopped meaning anything. Finally, a doctor entered the room, a tall man with graying hair and a serious expression. He spoke to Emily in low tones, and I saw her nod, wiping tears from her face. Then she stood, kissed David's forehead through his oxygen mask, and left the room. The nurse looked at me. "She's gone to the cafeteria. You have maybe 15 minutes before she comes back." I didn't think. I just moved. I pushed past the nurse and into David's room. The machines around his bed beeped steadily. He looked so pale, so vulnerable, with wires and tubes connecting him to various monitors. When he saw me, his eyes widened, and even through the oxygen mask, I could see the panic on his face. "Rebecca," he managed to say, his voice weak and muffled. I stood at the foot of his bed, my arms crossed over my chest, trying to hold myself together. "Who is she, David? Who is Emily Harrison? And don't you dare lie to me right now. You're in a hospital bed. I deserve the truth." He closed his eyes, and I saw a tear slide down his temple. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Those words, those useless, empty words. How many times had I heard them in movies, in other people's stories, and thought I'd never be hearing them directed at me? "How long?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "How long have you been living this double life?" David's heart monitor started beeping faster, and for a moment I felt guilty for upsetting him, but I pushed that feeling down. He didn't get to have a heart attack and escape this conversation. 3 years, he finally said. "We met at a conference in Portland. It was supposed to be just once, just one mistake. But then it kept happening. And then she got pregnant, and I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to choose. 3 years, 3 entire years of lies. I thought about all the business trips to Portland, all the late nights at the office, all the times he'd been distant and distracted, and I'd attributed it to work stress. How could I have been so blind? Make sure you're subscribed to follow what happens next in Rebecca's story. We're almost at 1,000 subscribers, and your support helps us continue bringing these powerful real-life stories to you. Hit that subscribe button now." I stood there, looking at this man I thought I knew, and realized I was looking at a complete stranger. What about me, David? What about our life? Our plans? We were supposed to start trying for a baby next year. Was that all just another lie? He was crying now, tears streaming down his face. "I love you, Rebecca. I do love you. I just also love her. I can't explain it. I can't make it make sense. But I never meant to hurt you. Never meant to hurt me. As if that mattered. As if his intentions changed the fact that my entire world had just imploded." A nurse came in to check his vitals, giving me a sympathetic look. She adjusted something on one of the machines and then quietly left. "I need to know everything," I said. "Is the baby yours?" David nodded. "She's having a girl. We found out last month." A girl. He had a daughter on the way, and I was just finding out about it in a hospital ICU at 2:30 in the morning. "Do you live with her?" "No," he said quickly. "No, I live with you, but I spend weekends there sometimes. When I tell you I'm going to Portland for work. So our entire weekend trips, our Sunday morning pancakes, our Netflix binges, those were all happening in a stolen timeline. The weekends he wasn't lying to me to be with her." "Does she know about me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from the shock on her face when I'd later confront her. He shook his head slightly. "She thinks I'm divorced. She thinks I'm fully committed to her and the baby. She has no idea you exist. This is the moment to subscribe if you haven't already. Help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers by clicking that button. These real stories need to be heard, and you can be part of that." "So you've been lying to both of us," I said flatly. "You've built 2 completely separate lives, and now you're in a hospital bed, and we're both here, and your house of cards has completely collapsed. What exactly were you planning to do when the baby was born, David? How were you going to explain that?" He didn't have an answer. Of course he didn't, because there was no answer, no way to make this work, no reality where this could have ended well. I heard footsteps in the hallway and knew Emily must be coming back. I looked at David one last time. I'm leaving now. And when you get out of this hospital, assuming you do, you'll be hearing from my lawyer. Don't call me, don't text me, don't show up at the house. We're done. His monitor started beeping frantically. Rebecca, please, we can work this out. We can figure something out. But I was already walking toward the door. There was nothing to figure out, nothing to work out. You couldn't rebuild a foundation that had never existed in the first place. I stepped into the hallway just as Emily was rounding the corner with a coffee cup in her hand. We made eye contact, and I saw confusion cross her face, probably wondering who I was. The nurse who had warned me earlier stepped forward, clearly trying to prevent a confrontation right there in the ICU hallway. Ladies, please, this is a medical facility. We need to keep things calm. But Emily was looking at me with growing understanding. I saw the exact moment she put it together. Who are you? She asked, her voice shaking. I'm Rebecca, I said simply. David's wife. The color drained from her face. Her coffee cup slipped from her hand, splashing hot liquid across the floor. His what? Wife? Legal wife? Have been for 9 years. We got married in a little church in Bellevue. Had a reception at the Edgewater Hotel. Honeymooned in Maui. The whole traditional thing. Click subscribe right now to see how this confrontation unfolds. Your subscription gets us closer to 1,000 subscribers and helps share these important stories. Don't forget to hit that button. Emily put her hand against the wall to steady herself. She looked like she might faint. That can't be right. He told me he was divorced. He told me you'd been separated for 4 years. He lives with me on weekends. We're having a baby. He's supposed to move in full-time next month. I felt a strange kinship with this woman in that moment. We were both victims of the same man, both lied to, both betrayed. He doesn't live with you, I said, my voice surprisingly gentle. He lives with me, in our house in Capitol Hill, the house we bought together 3 years ago, the same time. I'm guessing that he started his relationship with you. The nurse stepped between us. Ladies, I understand this is difficult, but Mr. Matthews is in critical condition. This stress isn't good for any of you. Perhaps you could both step into the waiting room. Emily was crying again, her hand still on her pregnant belly. I've been with him for 3 years. 3 years. He told me he loved me. He helped me pick names for our daughter. How could this whole time he was married to you? Because he's a coward, I said bluntly. Because he wanted both lives and couldn't choose. Because he's selfish and weak, and neither of us really knew him at all. I saw something shift in Emily's expression. Anger replacing shock. She turned and walked into David's room without another word. I heard her voice, loud and furious, even through the door. You're married? This whole time you've been married? You made me the other woman? I didn't stick around to hear his response. I walked down that hallway, past the nurse's station, down the elevator, and out into the Seattle rain. It was still coming down hard, soaking through my clothes immediately, but I didn't care. I stood in that parking lot and finally let myself cry. My phone rang. It was my best friend, Claire. She lived in Portland, ironically, but we talked almost every day. Rebecca, are you okay? I just got your voicemail about David being in the hospital. I tried to speak, but couldn't get words out through my sobbing. Claire immediately went into crisis mode. Stay there. I'm getting in my car right now. I'll be there in 3 hours. Don't move. But I couldn't stay there. I couldn't be anywhere near that hospital, near David, near the wreckage of what I'd thought was my life. I got in my car and drove. Subscribe now if you're invested in Rebecca's journey. We're building a community of people who appreciate authentic storytelling, and we need you to hit 1,000 subscribers. Click that subscribe button and join us. I drove around Seattle for hours, the city I'd loved, suddenly feeling foreign and hostile. I passed Pike Place Market, still busy even in the early morning hours. I drove past our favorite Italian restaurant in Belltown, where David had proposed to me 6 years ago. I drove past the movie theater where we'd had our first date, where we'd seen some forgettable romantic comedy, and he'd held my hand the entire time. Every street corner held a memory, and every memory was now tainted with the knowledge that it had all been built on lies. As the sun started to rise over the Cascade Mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, I finally pulled into a small diner in Fremont. I sat in a booth by the window and ordered coffee I couldn't drink and toast I couldn't eat. My phone had been buzzing nonstop. Calls from David's number, which I ignored. Texts from numbers I didn't recognize, probably Emily trying to reach me. Several from Claire telling me she was on her way. And one from David's mother, Susan, who I actually loved and who had no idea what her son had done. I called her back. "Rebecca, dear, I just heard about David. How is he? Is he going to be okay?" "I don't know, Susan," I said honestly, "and I don't know if I care anymore." There was a pause on the other end. "What do you mean?" So I told her. I told her everything. About Emily, about the pregnancy, about the 3 years of lies. Susan was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then she said, in a voice heavy with disappointment, "Oh, David, what have you done?" She believed me immediately, didn't make excuses for him, didn't suggest I was mistaken or misunderstanding. She just accepted that her son had done this terrible thing, and I loved her even more for that. Keep that subscribe button in mind as we continue. Your subscription matters and helps this channel grow. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and you can make that happen with just one click. "I'm so sorry, Rebecca," Susan said. "I'm so sorry. You deserve so much better than this." We sat on the phone together for a while, not really saying much, just existing in our shared grief and disappointment. Finally, she said, "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to get a lawyer," I said. "I'm going to file for divorce, and I'm going to figure out how to rebuild my life from scratch." Susan sighed. "If you need anything at all, you call me. You're still my daughter, regardless of what David has done." That almost made me start crying again. Claire arrived at the diner around 6 a.m., having driven through the night from Portland. She slid into the booth across from me, took one look at my face, and just reached across the table to hold my hands. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. I told her the whole story, from the phone call about David's heart attack to the confrontation in the ICU hallway with Emily. Claire listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with every detail. When I finished, she said simply, "We're going to get through this. I promise you, we're going to get through this." The next week was a blur. David stayed in the hospital for 5 days. His heart attack had been serious, but not catastrophic. He'd need lifestyle changes and medication, but he'd survive. I wouldn't have wished death on him. Despite everything, but I also couldn't bring myself to care much about his recovery. I moved into Claire's spare bedroom temporarily while I figured out my next steps. She'd taken emergency leave from her job as a physical therapist to come support me, and I didn't know what I would have done without her. I hired a lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in divorce cases. She listened to my story with professional calm and then said, "This is going to be straightforward. Adultery is grounds for divorce in Washington state. With the other woman being pregnant, we have clear evidence. You're going to be fine legally, but emotionally, that's going to take longer." She was right about that. Don't forget to subscribe to follow the rest of Rebecca's journey. Your subscription helps us reach 1,000 subscribers and continue sharing real stories that matter. Hit that subscribe button now and be part of our community. David tried to contact me repeatedly. Phone calls I didn't answer, texts I didn't read. He even showed up at Claire's apartment once, but she answered the door and told him in no uncertain terms to leave or she'd call the police. He sent flowers to my office, which I immediately donated to the hospital where this nightmare had started. He sent letters, long, rambling things about how sorry he was, how he never meant for any of this to happen, how he loved both of us and didn't know how to choose, as if any of that mattered, as if sorry could fix anything. Emily reached out to me too, about 2 weeks after that night. She sent me an email. I almost deleted it without reading, but something made me open it. Her message was surprisingly honest. She wrote that she'd been completely blindsided, that she'd had no idea I existed, that David had maintained such complete separation between his two lives that she'd never suspected a thing. She said she was sorry for her part in it, even though she hadn't known. And she said she was keeping the baby and raising her as a single mother because she couldn't trust David anymore either. She'd kicked him out of her life completely. I wrote back to her. I told her I believed that she hadn't known, that we'd both been victims of the same man's selfishness. I told her I hoped she and her daughter would be okay, and that I bore her no ill will. We weren't going to be friends, probably wouldn't ever speak again after that exchange. But there was something important about acknowledging our shared experience, about not letting David's lies turn us against each other when we were both innocent in this. If you're still watching, please take a moment to subscribe. We're working hard to reach 1,000 subscribers, and your support makes all the difference. Just click that red button below. The divorce proceedings moved quickly. David didn't contest anything. He signed whatever Patricia put in front of him. We divided assets, and because Washington is a community property state, and because of the clear adultery, I came out well. The house was mine. The savings were split, but weighted in my favor. I kept my car, my retirement accounts, everything I'd brought into the marriage. David would have to start over financially, and frankly, I didn't care. He'd have child support to pay soon enough for his daughter. That was his problem now, not mine. 3 months after that night in the hospital, I was sitting in Patricia's office, signing the final divorce papers. "It's done," she said simply, sliding the documents across her desk. "You're officially divorced." I thought I'd feel something in that moment, relief maybe, or sadness, or anger. But I just felt empty, numb. 9 years of my life, just gone, erased, like they'd never happened. "Thank you," I told Patricia, "for everything." She smiled at me, a genuine warm smile. "You're going to be okay, Rebecca. I've seen a lot of people go through this, and you're one of the strong ones. You're going to land on your feet." I went back to work full-time, throwing myself into projects at the architecture firm. My boss, knowing what I was going through, gave me some high-profile assignments, things that would demand all my attention and creativity. I redesigned a waterfront park, drew up plans for a new residential tower in South Lake Union, consulted on a historic renovation in Pioneer Square. Work became my refuge, the one place where I could lose myself in something that had nothing to do with David or betrayal or broken promises. Claire eventually had to go back to Portland and her own life, but we talked every day. She visited on weekends when she could. My parents, who lived in Spokane, wanted me to move back home, but I refused. Seattle was my city. I'd built a life here, and I wasn't going to let David's betrayal drive me away from the place I loved. I was going to rebuild right here, in the same city where everything had fallen apart. Your subscription keeps stories like this one coming. If you believe in authentic storytelling and want to help us hit 1,000 subscribers, click that subscribe button right now. It takes just 1 second. About 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Emily had had her baby. A girl, just as they'd known. She'd named her Sophie. I found myself hoping, genuinely hoping, that the baby was healthy and that Emily had support. Whatever anger I might have felt toward her had long since faded. We'd both been casualties of the same war, soldiers on the same side without knowing it. I heard that David was trying to be part of Sophie's life, showing up for doctor's appointments and helping with expenses, though Emily had made it clear they would never be together. He'd destroyed that possibility the same way he'd destroyed our marriage. I didn't date for a long time after the divorce. The thought of trusting someone again, of being vulnerable, of believing what someone told me felt impossible. How could I ever know if someone was being honest? David had looked me in the eye every single day and lied without hesitation. He'd been a good liar. A convincing liar. What if everyone was? Claire kept telling me that not everyone was like David, that there were good people out there, trustworthy people. Intellectually, I knew she was right. Emotionally, I couldn't accept it. But slowly, very slowly, I started to heal. The raw, open wound that had been my heart started to scab over. I started going out with friends again, started accepting invitations to dinner parties and movie nights, started laughing again, really laughing, not just going through the motions. I took a pottery class and discovered I was terrible at it, but enjoyed it anyway. I joined a hiking group and spent weekends exploring the trails around Mount Rainier and the Olympic Peninsula. I even adopted a dog, a rescue terrier mix named Milo, who had his own trust issues and seemed to understand mine. Before we wrap up this story, make sure you've clicked subscribe. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and your support means everything. Join our community by hitting that subscribe button now. About a year after the divorce, I ran into David. It was completely random. At a coffee shop in Capitol Hill, not far from the house that had been ours and was now just mine. He was paying for his drink when I walked in. We both froze. He looked older, more tired. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. "How are you?" he asked quietly, stepping aside so I could order. "I'm good," I said honestly. "Actually good, not just surviving, really living again." He nodded, looking down at his coffee cup. "I'm glad. I really am. Rebecca, I know I don't have the right to say this, but I am sorry. For everything. Every single day I'm sorry." I looked at him, this man I'd loved so completely, and felt nothing but a distant sadness for both of us. "I know you are, David, but sorry doesn't change anything. It doesn't undo the hurt or give me back the years I spent living a lie. It just is what it is." "How's Sophie?" I asked, surprising myself. "She's beautiful," he said, and his face lit up briefly. "She's 8 months old now, starting to crawl. She has Emily's eyes." "That's good," I said. "I hope you're a good father to her. Better than you were a husband to me." He winced, but nodded. "I'm trying. I'm really trying to do right by her. At least by someone, then." We stood there awkwardly for another moment, two people who'd once shared a life, now complete strangers. "Take care of yourself, Rebecca," he finally said. "You too, David." And I meant it. I didn't wish him harm. I just wished he didn't exist in my world anymore. I got my coffee and left, and that was the last time I saw him. I heard later that he'd moved to Tacoma, closer to Emily and Sophie, trying to be present in his daughter's life, even though he and Emily would never be together. I hoped he'd learned something from the disaster he'd created. I hoped he wouldn't do to someone else what he'd done to us. 2 years after that night in the ICU, I met someone new. His name was Marcus, and he was a contractor I was working with on a renovation project. He was patient and kind and refreshingly honest. Our relationship developed slowly, carefully, like we were both made of fragile glass. I told him about David early on, about the betrayal and the divorce, and he listened without judgment. "I understand why you'd be cautious," he said, "and I'm okay with taking things as slow as you need. We have all the time in the world, and we did take it slow. Months of friendship before our first date, more months of dating before anything serious. But gradually, carefully, I learned to trust again, to believe that not everyone was a liar, that not every love story ended in betrayal. One last reminder to subscribe if you haven't already. Your subscription helps us reach 1,000 subscribers and continue bringing real, powerful stories like Rebecca's to our audience. Click that button now. Marcus proposed to me on a hiking trail overlooking Mount Rainier, in the same mountains where I'd started to find myself again after my world fell apart. I said yes, without hesitation, without fear, because I knew him, really knew him. And he knew me, all my broken pieces and sharp edges, and loved me anyway. We got married in a small ceremony with just close friends and family. Claire was my maid of honor, and she cried through the entire ceremony. "You did it," she whispered to me afterward. "You survived, and you rebuilt, and you found happiness again. I'm so proud of you." Looking back now, 4 years after that night when a nurse grabbed my arm and told me to hide, I can see how far I've come. The woman who stood in that hospital hallway watching her husband with another woman feels like a different person. That Rebecca was naive, trusting without question, believing that love was enough to sustain a marriage. This Rebecca knows better. This Rebecca knows that trust has to be earned and maintained, that actions matter more than words, that you can love someone and they can still destroy you if you're not paying attention. But this Rebecca also knows that surviving betrayal doesn't mean closing yourself off to love. It means being smarter about who you give your heart to. It means demanding honesty and reciprocating it. It means building a relationship on truth instead of fantasy. I still live in Seattle, still work at the same architecture firm, now as a partner. I still have coffee at that same shop in Capitol Hill sometimes, though David has long since moved away. Milo is still by my side, a little grayer now, but just as loyal. Marcus and I bought a house together in Ballard, with a view of the Sound, and enough space for the future we're building together. I don't think about David often anymore. When I do, it's without the sharp pain it used to bring. Just a dull ache of sadness for the time I lost and the person I thought he was. Emily and I never spoke again after those few emails, but I heard through the grapevine that she's doing well, that Sophie is thriving, that Emily eventually found a good partner who helps her raise her daughter. I'm genuinely happy for her. We both deserved better than what David gave us, and I'm glad we both found it. The night the nurse told me to hide changed everything. It ended one life and forced me to build another. And while I wouldn't wish that kind of betrayal on anyone, I can say now with complete honesty that I'm stronger for having survived it. I'm wiser, more careful, but also more appreciative of real love when I find it. That night taught me that people are capable of extraordinary deception, but the years since have taught me that they're also capable of extraordinary resilience. You can be broken completely and still put yourself back together. The cracks might show, you might be different than you were before, but different doesn't mean damaged. Sometimes it just means stronger. Sometimes it means better. And 4 years later, standing in my new kitchen with Marcus, drinking morning coffee and watching the Seattle sunrise paint the sky, I can honestly say I'm better. Not despite what happened, but because I refused to let it destroy me permanently. Because I chose to rebuild instead of giving up. Because that nurse who grabbed my arm and whispered hide gave me a gift, even though it didn't feel like one at the time. She gave me the truth, ugly and painful as it was, and the truth, no matter how much it hurts, is always better than living a lie. I never imagined that rebuilding a life from absolute devastation could teach me more about myself than 9 years of marriage ever did. The months following my divorce were like learning to walk again after a catastrophic accident. Every step forward felt uncertain, every moment of happiness tinged with the fear that it would be ripped away just like everything else had been. But I kept moving forward, kept putting one foot in front of the other, because the alternative was staying stuck in that hospital hallway forever, watching through a window as my entire world revealed itself to be a carefully constructed illusion. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you're finding value in this story. We're building toward 1,000 subscribers, and every single subscription helps us continue sharing these powerful, real-life experiences. Your support truly matters. About 8 months after the divorce was finalized, something unexpected happened that forced me to confront David's betrayal in a whole new way. I was at work, deep into the design phase of a mixed-use development project in the university district, when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something made me answer. The voice on the other end was female, young, nervous. Is this Rebecca Matthews? Well, Rebecca Chen now. I'd taken back my maiden name as soon as the divorce was final, erasing that last connection to David. Yes, this is Rebecca. Who's calling? There was a pause, then, my name is Jennifer Wu. I don't know if you know who I am, but I think I need to talk to you about David Matthews. My blood went cold. Another one. There was another one. Jennifer went on to explain that she'd been seeing David for about 6 months. They'd met at a coffee shop in Tacoma, where he'd moved after the divorce. He'd told her he was divorced, which was technically true, but he'd painted himself as the victim. According to his version of events, I'd been controlling and cold, and we'd grown apart naturally. He'd conveniently left out the part about Emily and the affair and the baby. Jennifer had only discovered the truth by accident. She'd been at David's apartment when Sophie's baby monitor, which he kept for his custody weekends, had gone off. Jennifer had been confused because David had never mentioned having a child. When she'd asked him about it, he'd fumbled through an explanation, and the whole story had started unraveling. Jennifer, being smarter than I'd been, had started digging. She'd found Emily on social media. She'd found me. She'd pieced together the timeline and realized that David's pattern of deception hadn't ended with our divorce. He was still lying, still manipulating, still building false narratives to justify his actions. "Why are you calling me?" I asked, though I thought I knew the answer. "Because I needed to hear the truth from you," Jennifer said. "Because he made you sound like a villain, and I needed to know if that was real or just another lie. And because I thought you deserved to know that he hasn't changed. That he's still the same person who hurt you." I appreciated her honesty, even though hearing about David's continued deceptions opened up wounds I thought had healed. We talked for almost an hour. I told her my version of events, the real version, and I could hear her crying quietly on the other end of the line. If you're still watching and you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. Click that subscribe button and help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. These stories need to be heard, and you make that possible. "I'm so stupid," Jennifer said. "All the signs were there. The weekends he wasn't available. The way he was vague about his past. The fact that he never wanted me to meet his friends or family. I just didn't want to see it." "You're not stupid," I told her, and I meant it. He's a skilled liar. He's had years of practice. The fact that you figured it out in 6 months means you're smarter than I was. It took me 3 years and a heart attack to discover the truth. Jennifer thanked me for being honest with her and said she was ending things with David immediately. I wished her well and told her she deserved someone who would be honest with her from the start. After we hung up, I sat at my desk for a long time, staring at nothing. That phone call with Jennifer did something unexpected. Instead of sending me spiraling back into anger and pain, it actually helped me let go of the last remaining threads connecting me to David. Knowing that he was still out there making the same mistakes, still lying and manipulating, confirmed that leaving him had been absolutely the right decision. He hadn't been a good man who made one terrible mistake. He was a fundamentally dishonest person, and that wasn't something I could have fixed or changed. His issues went deeper than just our relationship. They were part of who he was as a person. I told Marcus about the phone call that evening. We were cooking dinner together in my apartment, the one I'd moved into after selling the house that held too many memories. Marcus listened carefully, stirring the pasta sauce while I chopped vegetables and talked. When I finished, he set down the spoon and turned to face me. "How do you feel about it?" he asked. "Not how do you think you should feel. How do you actually feel?" That was one of the things I loved about Marcus. He never told me how to feel or tried to manage my emotions. He just gave me space to be honest about them. "I actually feel relieved," I said, surprising myself with the truth. "Relieved?" He raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, because it confirms that leaving was right, that he's always going to be that person, and I'm never going to have to deal with it again. I'm free of him, really, truly free, and she just reminded me why that's such a good thing." Marcus smiled and pulled me into a hug. "That's a healthy response. "You're healing, Rebecca. Really healing." And he was right. I was healing. The scar tissue was forming, and while the scars would always be there, they were no longer open wounds. Subscribe now to continue following this journey of healing and resilience. Your subscription brings us closer to 1,000 subscribers and helps share stories that truly matter. Don't forget to hit that button. Around that same time, I reconnected with some old friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage. It's funny how you don't notice yourself becoming isolated until you're suddenly free and realize how small your world had become. During my marriage to David, I'd gradually stopped seeing certain friends. It had been subtle, not a deliberate thing, but looking back I could see the pattern. Missed dinner invitations because David had made other plans. Canceled girls' nights because he'd wanted me home. Slowly, gradually, my social circle had shrunk until it was mostly just David and his friends, David and his family, David and his world. Now, I was actively rebuilding my own world. I reached out to my college roommate, Sarah, who I hadn't spoken to in almost 5 years. We met for brunch at a place in Fremont, and it was like no time had passed at all. She was married now, too, with twin boys who were 3 years old, and she was working as a pediatric nurse at Seattle Children's Hospital. I told her about the divorce, and she wasn't entirely surprised. "I always thought he was controlling," she admitted. "The way he'd monopolize your time. The way he always had an opinion about what you wore or how you spent your free time." I wanted to say something, but you seemed happy, and I didn't want to be that friend who criticized your relationship. "I wish you had said something," I told her. Though I knew it wouldn't have mattered. I probably wouldn't have listened. When you're in it, you can't see it clearly. Sarah nodded knowingly. That's the thing about manipulative people. They're really good at making you think everything is your choice, even when they're the ones pulling all the strings. We made a pact that day to stay in touch regularly, to not let life or relationships pull us apart again. And we stuck to it. Sarah became one of my closest friends again, someone I could call at midnight when I was having a hard day, someone who would show up with wine and ice cream and terrible reality TV to distract me. I also reconnected with my cousin Michelle, who lived in Seattle, and who I'd barely seen during my marriage. Michelle was 10 years older than me, divorced herself with a teenage daughter. She'd been through her own betrayal, her own rebuilding, and she became a mentor of sorts. She'd grab coffee with me once a week and just let me talk. Sometimes I needed to vent about David, even months after the divorce. Sometimes I needed advice about dating again, or trusting again, or just existing in the world as a single woman after being part of a couple for so long. Your subscription helps this channel grow and reach more people with authentic stories like Rebecca's. We're working toward 1,000 subscribers, so please click that subscribe button right now and be part of this community. Michelle told me something during one of those coffee dates that stuck with me. She said, "You know what the silver lining of betrayal is? You become really good at trusting your instincts. You learn to pay attention to those little warning signs you used to ignore. You become someone who won't tolerate being treated poorly because you know exactly how bad it can get. It makes you stronger, but it also makes you more selective, and that's not a bad thing." She was right. I noticed I was much more aware of red flags now. When I started dating again, I paid attention to inconsistencies in stories. I noticed when someone was vague about their past or their availability. I asked direct questions and expected direct answers. Some guys found it off-putting, thought I was too intense or too suspicious, and that was fine. Those weren't the right guys for me anyway. Marcus had been different from the start. When I'd asked him about his past relationships, he'd been completely open. He'd been engaged once, in his late 20s, and his fiancée had called it off 6 months before the wedding because she'd realized she didn't actually want to get married. She just wanted the wedding. It had hurt him deeply, but he'd been honest about it. He hadn't painted her as a villain or himself as a victim. He just acknowledged that sometimes relationships end, and it's nobody's fault, and you heal and move forward. He'd also been open about his family, his friends, his job. There were no mysterious weekends away, no phone calls he had to take in another room, no vague explanations. He was an open book, and after David's layers of deception, that transparency was like water in a desert. About a year into our relationship, Marcus asked me a question that made me realize how far I'd come. We were hiking on a trail near Snoqualmie Falls, taking a break at an overlook with a view of the cascading water below. He turned to me and said, "Do you think you'll ever fully trust again? Like 100%? No reservations? The way you trusted before David?" It was a fair question, and I thought about it carefully before answering. "I don't think I'll ever trust blindly again," I said honestly. "But I don't think that's a bad thing. Blind trust is just naivety. What I have now is earned trust. I trust you because you've proven yourself trustworthy, consistently, over time. That's better than blind trust. That's real trust." Make sure you're subscribed to see how Rebecca's story continues to unfold. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and your support makes these stories possible. Hit that subscribe button now. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "I can live with earned trust. Actually, I prefer it. It means, when you say you trust me, it actually means something. It wasn't built on blind faith or wishful thinking. It was built on evidence and experience. That conversation solidified something for me. I didn't need to become the person I was before David in order to have a healthy relationship. That person was gone, and maybe that was okay. The person I was now, scarred but stronger, cautious but not closed off, that person was capable of real, mature love. Not the fairy tale kind I'd believed in during my marriage, but something deeper and more authentic. The second anniversary of that night in the ICU came and went without much fanfare. I marked it privately, acknowledging how much had changed in 2 years. I'd gone from devastated and lost to genuinely happy and hopeful. I had a career I loved, friends I could count on, a partner who respected and valued me, and most importantly, I had myself back. Not the naive version who'd existed before, but a wiser, stronger version who knew her worth and wouldn't settle for less than she deserved. I went hiking alone that day, something I'd been doing regularly as a form of meditation. There was something about being out in nature, surrounded by the towering evergreens and the sounds of birds and rushing water, that helped me process emotions and gain perspective. I sat on a boulder overlooking a lake, watching the sunlight dance across the water, and thought about forgiveness. People had been telling me for 2 years that I needed to forgive David in order to fully move on. I'd always resisted that advice because it felt like forgiving him would mean what he did was okay, and it would never be okay. But sitting there in the peaceful silence of the woods, I realized forgiveness didn't have to mean condoning his actions. It could just mean releasing the hold those actions had on me. It could mean accepting that he was a flawed person who made terrible choices, and while that hurt me deeply, holding on to anger about it was only hurting me more. If you're finding this story meaningful, please subscribe to our channel. We're working to reach 1,000 subscribers, and every subscription helps us continue sharing real, authentic stories. Click that button now. I didn't forgive David that day, not completely, but I started the process. I acknowledged that he was probably dealing with his own demons, his own issues that had nothing to do with me. Maybe he'd been unhappy in our marriage and didn't know how to say it. Maybe he had some deep-seated need for validation that required multiple relationships. Maybe he was just selfish and weak. Whatever the reasons, they were his to deal with, not mine to carry. My job was to heal from what he'd done, not to understand why he'd done it. That realization was incredibly freeing. When I got back from that hike, I did something I'd been putting off for months. I went through the boxes of stuff from my marriage that I'd shoved in a storage unit and never dealt with. Wedding photos, honeymoon souvenirs, cards and letters David had written me over the years. I'd been avoiding those boxes because I knew going through them would hurt, but I'd also known I needed to face them eventually. I couldn't just let them sit there forever, taking up physical and mental space. Claire came over to help. She sat with me on my apartment floor as I opened box after box, looking at the remnants of a life that no longer existed. Some things made me cry. Our wedding album, seeing how genuinely happy I looked in those photos, how full of hope and love. A card David had given me on our 5th anniversary, telling me I was the love of his life and he couldn't imagine existing without me. All lies, or at least half-truths. He'd meant them when he wrote them, probably, but they hadn't been enough to keep him faithful. Other things made me angry. Photos from trips we'd taken, weekends away that I now realized had probably been cover for visits with Emily. A calendar where he'd meticulously tracked our schedules, and I could now see the patterns of when he'd been with her versus with me. But some things just made me sad. Sad for the couple we could have been if he'd been honest. Sad for the wasted years. Sad for the woman I'd been who'd believed so completely in something that didn't really exist. Claire sat with me through all of it, not saying much, just being present. When we finished going through the boxes, I kept a few things. A photo of us from early in our relationship, before the lies started, when things were still simple. A postcard from our honeymoon, because the memory of that trip was mine to keep, regardless of what came after. But most of it, I let go. We loaded box after box into Claire's car and drove to a donation center. Let someone else get use out of the dishes and linens and all the domestic detritus of a failed marriage. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Your subscription helps us reach 1,000 subscribers and continue bringing meaningful stories to our audience. Hit that button and join our growing community. The wedding dress was the hardest thing to let go of. I'd spent months finding the perfect dress, hours getting it altered to fit just right. I'd felt like a princess in that dress, walking down the aisle toward what I thought was my happily ever after. Part of me wanted to keep it, maybe for a daughter someday, but I knew that was ridiculous. I didn't want my future daughter wearing a dress tied to so much pain and disappointment. And besides, keeping it felt like holding on to something that needed to be released. So I donated it to a charity that provided wedding dresses to military brides. At least someone would get joy from it, even if I hadn't gotten my fairy tale ending. After we dropped everything off, Claire and I went to a bar in Capitol Hill and had margaritas. To new beginnings, Claire toasted, raising her glass. To new beginnings, I echoed, and I meant it. Cleaning out those boxes felt like closing a chapter. The past was the past. It had happened, it had shaped me, but it didn't define me anymore. I was free to write new chapters now, ones where I was the author of my own story instead of just a character in someone else's narrative. The summer I turned 36, exactly 2 years after that devastating night in the hospital, something unexpected happened. I won an award. The American Institute of Architects recognized one of my designs, a community center in Rainier Valley, as one of the most innovative public spaces in the Pacific Northwest. It was a huge honor, something I'd dreamed about since architecture school, but never actually expected to achieve. The award ceremony was in Portland, ironically, the city where David's affair had begun. But I refused to let that association taint my achievement. Claire came with me for support, and Marcus took time off work to be there too. Standing on that stage, accepting the award, talking about my design philosophy and the importance of creating spaces that serve diverse communities, I felt powerful in a way I never had during my marriage. During my marriage, my career had been important, but secondary. David's job as a financial analyst had always taken precedence. When one of us had to work late, it was usually me who adjusted my schedule. When one of us had to miss an event for work, it was usually him who went while I stayed home. I'd accepted that dynamic without really questioning it, assuming that's just how marriages worked. But now, standing in front of a room full of respected architects and urban planners, receiving recognition for my work, I realized how much I'd diminished myself during those 9 years, how much smaller I'd made myself to accommodate David's ego and ambitions. Please take a moment to subscribe if you're enjoying Rebecca's journey. We're building toward 1,000 subscribers, and every subscription helps us share more stories like this one. Click that subscribe button now. After the ceremony, at the reception, an older woman approached me. She introduced herself as Linda Morrison, a renowned architect who'd been practicing for 40 years. I'd admired her work since I was a student. She congratulated me on my award and then said something that struck me deeply. "I looked at your portfolio before tonight. You're incredibly talented. But I also looked at your timeline, and I noticed your best work has all come in the last 2 years. What changed?" I hesitated, not sure how much to share, but something about her direct gaze made me honest. "I got divorced 2 years ago. I think I stopped holding myself back after that." Linda nodded knowingly. "I see that pattern a lot, especially with women architects. We're so conditioned to make ourselves smaller, to accommodate partners and families, to be supportive rather than supported. Sometimes it takes a major life change to break that pattern." She paused, then added, "Your ex-husband's loss, the architecture world's gain." That conversation stayed with me long after the event ended. It made me think about all the ways I'd unconsciously limited myself during my marriage, not because David explicitly told me to, but because I'd internalized certain expectations about what a good wife should be. A good wife was supportive. A good wife prioritized her husband's career. A good wife didn't rock the boat or demand too much or shine too brightly. But I wasn't a wife anymore, good or otherwise, and that freedom was intoxicating. I could pursue opportunities aggressively without worrying about how it would affect David's ego. I could work late on projects I was passionate about without guilt. I could accept awards and accolades without downplaying them. I could take up space in the world without apologizing for it. That fall, about 2.5 years after the divorce, Marcus and I started talking seriously about marriage. He'd never pressured me, never pushed for more commitment than I was ready to give, but as time passed and our relationship deepened, it felt like a natural progression. Still, I was terrified. How could I promise forever to someone when I'd already done that once and had it blow up so spectacularly? One evening, sitting on his couch with Milo curled up between us, I voiced those fears. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Not of you specifically. Of marriage. Of promising something I can't guarantee. What if I'm a terrible judge of character? What if I'm wrong about you the way I was wrong about David?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, "You weren't wrong about David. He was actively deceiving you. He was presenting a false version of himself. That's different from misjudging someone's character. That's being lied to. But I hear what you're saying. You're scared of being blindsided again." Subscribe now if you want to see how Rebecca navigates this new relationship and the possibility of marriage again. We're working toward 1,000 subscribers, and your support makes all the difference. Click that button below. "I am," I admitted, terrified of it. "So let me ask you this," Marcus said. "What would make you feel safe? What would need to be different this time?" I thought about it carefully. "Complete transparency," I finally said. "No areas of your life that are off limits to me. No mysterious phone calls or unexplained absences. Access to everything, and I give you the same." It might sound controlling, but after what I went through, I need that level of openness. Marcus nodded. "That sounds completely reasonable to me. You want to know my phone password? It's yours. You want access to my email? Done. You want to meet every friend I have and know everyone I spend time with? Absolutely. I have nothing to hide, Rebecca. And if being completely transparent is what you need to feel safe, that's an easy promise to make." That conversation marked a turning point. We did exchange phone passwords, not because we regularly checked each other's phones, but because the openness itself was reassuring. We met each other's friends and families. We talked openly about our schedules and plans. We built a relationship on a foundation of complete honesty. And it was so different from what I'd had with David that sometimes I couldn't believe this was my life now. Marcus proposed to me on the 3-year anniversary of my divorce being finalized. We were back at Mount Rainier, at a different overlook than where he'd asked me about trust. He got down on one knee, pulled out a simple but beautiful ring, and said, "Rebecca, I know marriage is scary for you after everything you've been through. But I promise you, every single day, I will be honest with you. I will be faithful to you. I will be present in this relationship, not just physically, but emotionally. I will build a life with you, not a lie. Will you marry me? I said yes without hesitation, because he'd earned that yes over 3 years of consistent, reliable, honest presence in my life. Because he'd proven himself trustworthy through actions, not just words. Because I loved him, and more importantly, I trusted him. We planned a small wedding, nothing like the elaborate affair David and I had had. Just close friends and family at a venue overlooking Puget Sound. Claire was my maid of honor again, crying happy tears this time. Sarah and Michelle stood up with me too. Marcus's brother was his best man. The ceremony was simple and intimate and perfect. When we exchanged vows, I cried, but they were tears of joy and relief and hope. Don't forget to subscribe to follow the conclusion of Rebecca's incredible journey. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and your subscription truly matters. Hit that button now and be part of our community. In my vows, I said something I'd spent a long time thinking about. I said, Marcus, 3 years ago, I didn't think I'd ever trust anyone again. I thought David had broken something in me that couldn't be repaired. But you showed me that trust isn't about blind faith or wishful thinking. It's about consistency. It's about showing up day after day and being exactly who you say you are. You've done that for me, and I promise to do the same for you. Our marriage won't be perfect because nothing is, but it will be honest. It will be real. And that's worth everything to me. There wasn't a dry eye in the place when I finished. Our honeymoon was nothing fancy, just a week at a cabin in the San Juan Islands, but it was perfect. We hiked and kayaked and spent evenings on the deck watching the sunset over the water. We talked about our future, about maybe buying a bigger house, about maybe starting a family someday when I felt ready. We made plans together, real plans built on mutual trust and respect. And I realized, maybe for the first time since that horrible night in the ICU, I was genuinely excited about the future. Not anxious, not scared, just excited. Now 4 years after that night that changed everything, I can look back with perspective I didn't have then. The betrayal that felt like it would destroy me actually freed me. It ended a marriage that was built on lies and gave me the opportunity to build something real. It hurt like hell, and I wouldn't wish that kind of pain on anyone, but I can honestly say I'm grateful for where it led me. I'm grateful for the way it forced me to examine my own patterns and behaviors. The way I'd made myself smaller, the way I'd accepted less than I deserved, the way I'd prioritized someone else's needs and wants over my own. I'm grateful for the friends who supported me through the darkest time of my life and the new relationships I built afterward. I'm grateful for the career success that came when I stopped holding myself back. And I'm grateful for Marcus, who showed me that good men exist, that real love is possible, that trust can be rebuilt even after it's been shattered. I heard through the grapevine that David eventually got help. He started seeing a therapist, working through whatever issues had led him to live such a compartmentalized, dishonest life. I'm glad for that, mostly for Sophie's sake. She deserves a father who's dealt with his demons, but his journey is his own. I'm no longer part of it, and that's exactly how it should be. Subscribe right now if this story has resonated with you. We're building a community of people who appreciate real, authentic storytelling, and we need your help to reach 1,000 subscribers. Click that button below. Emily and I never became friends, but I did see her once more, completely by chance. About 3 years after everything happened. I was at a park in Tacoma, meeting a client to discuss a potential project, and I saw her there with Sophie, who was now a toddler with dark curls and her mother's auburn hair. Our eyes met across the playground, and there was a moment of mutual recognition and shared understanding. We both nodded, a simple acknowledgement of what we'd been through together, separately. Then we each went back to our lives. There was nothing to say. We'd both survived the same storm, found our way to shore, and were building new lives. That was enough. The scar from David's betrayal will always be there, I know that. There are still moments, rare now, but they happen, when I feel a flicker of the old fear. When Marcus is late coming home without texting. When he's vague about something minor. My heart rate spikes, and I have to consciously remind myself that he's not David, that not everyone is a liar, that I'm safe. But those moments are getting fewer and farther between, and I know eventually they'll stop altogether. The human brain is remarkably resilient. It can heal from almost anything if you give it time and space and support. Looking back at that night in the ICU, the moment the nurse grabbed my arm and told me to hide, I understand now that she did me a favor. She could have let me walk into that room unprepared, could have let me discover the truth in an even more painful way. Instead, she gave me a moment to brace myself, a moment to prepare for the impact. And while nothing could have truly prepared me for what I was about to learn, that moment of warning made a difference. I've often wondered about that nurse, wished I could thank her for her kindness in an impossible situation. She didn't have to protect me, she didn't know me, but she saw a woman about to have her world destroyed, and she tried to cushion the blow. That small act of compassion from a stranger stayed with me and reminded me that even in our darkest moments, there are people who care, people who try to help. If I could go back and talk to the Rebecca who stood in that hospital hallway 4 years ago, devastated and lost and broken, I'd tell her this: you're going to survive. I know you can't believe that right now. I know it feels like your life is over and you'll never be happy again. But you're stronger than you think. This pain won't last forever. You will rebuild. You will heal. You will love again. And it will be better than what you had, because it will be real. The person you become after this, she's going to be amazing. Scarred, yes, but stronger. Wiser. More authentically herself than she's ever been. So, hold on. Keep breathing. Take it one day at a time. You've got this. One final reminder to subscribe before we close out this story. Your subscription helps us reach 1,000 subscribers and continue bringing powerful, authentic stories like Rebecca's to our audience. Click that subscribe button now. 4 years later, I'm living a life I couldn't have imagined during those dark days after the divorce. I have a marriage built on truth and mutual respect. I have a career I'm proud of and excited about. I have friendships that nourish me. I have a dog who's loyal and loving and asks for nothing but walks and belly rubs. I have myself back, the core of who I am, no longer twisted and diminished to fit someone else's needs. And I have hope. Real, genuine hope for the future. Not the naive hope of someone who's never been hurt, but the resilient hope of someone who's been broken and put herself back together. That's a different kind of hope. A stronger kind. The kind that can weather storms because it's already survived the worst one. So yes, I rushed into the ICU to see my husband, and the nurse said hide, and what I saw through that window destroyed the life I thought I had. But it also gave me the opportunity to build the life I actually wanted, even though I didn't know it at the time. Betrayal is a terrible teacher, but it's an effective one. It teaches you about resilience and strength and the importance of truth. It teaches you that you can survive things you thought would kill you. It teaches you that endings, even devastating ones, can lead to new beginnings. And sometimes, those new beginnings are better than anything that came before. That night in the hospital was the worst night of my life, but it was also, in a strange way, the beginning of my best life. The life I'm living now. Authentic and honest and full of real love. The life I deserved all along but couldn't have while I was living someone else's lie. For that, as painful as it was, I'm almost grateful.